Hello everybody, and welcome to How to Web Live episode 2. How to Web Live is a bi-monthly live show where we invite some of the biggest stars in the technology world to share the insights and lessons so far. During the broadcast you can ask questions in the chat box, and some of those will be picked up and answered live by our guests. Big thanks to Defender for powering this series and empowering our internet experience safely. Today, live from Detroit, Michigan, we have Bob Moesta, president of the Rewire Group and an expert on creating, developing, and launching new products and services. Bob has been one of the principal architects of the jobs to be done theory in the mid-90s, along with Harvard Business School professor Clayton Christensen. And he continued to develop and apply this innovation framework to everyday business challenges. His latest book, Demand-Side Sales 101, takes a fresh perspective on sales using the jobs to be done framework. Because sales don't have to feel icky for you or your customers. Launched just 2 days ago, Demand-Side Sales 101 is already an Amazon bestseller. The show will be hosted by Valentin Radu, a successful serial entrepreneur and an online marketing expert, an international speaker, and a growth interviews podcaster. He's the CEO of OmniConvert, an award-winning all-in-one conversion platform. They both have a knack for making sales not boring. Are you into sales too? If so, now it's the time to get your sales strategy on. Questions welcome throughout the show. Bob, Valentin, welcome to How to Web Live.
All right, Valentin, you're up.
So, hello, everyone, and welcome to this amazing episode with Bob Moesta. I'm Valentin, and Bob, thank you for, I'm not going to say coming, but being here with us today.
Yes, thank you for having me back. Again, my time in Romania was amazing last year, and I'm happy to be able to contribute some more.
Excellent. So, what have you been up to in the in the last year?
Yeah, so a couple of things that have come up. One is obviously I've been writing books. So when COVID happened, I'd been through, I would say, similar type things before, and I know that for me, business usually stopped for anywhere from 4 to 6 months, and so I kind of sat down and said, all right, what do I want to write about? What do I want to think about? What do I want to go build? And so I actually have, I just finished a book called Demand-Side Sales. So I'm talking about sales and using jobs to be done around sales. But I've also got another book coming called How to Build. And then I have 2 software products I've been working on as well. So I've been very busy. And at the same time, to be honest, I've had to reinvent my entire business, as most people have, in terms of delivery. So it's been, to be honest, it's been a very exciting time to kind of innovate.
Yeah, that's truly exciting. Last time when we've chat about the jobs to be done framework, you told me that this is a great framework for product, and now you came up with this angle towards sales. So tell us about how jobs to be done can be applied in sales. To be honest, I've just started to read your book because it was available on Kindle.
Yeah.
But,
so what's interesting is for me, I had to learn sales. I'm an engineer, and so as somebody who had to learn how to sell, I thought it was just following a process, and I realized that it just wasn't that way. The other thing I started to actually understand is, like, at least here in the US, they don't actually teach sales at business school. So you go to business school, you learn finance, you learn marketing, you learn organizational design, you learn strategy, but you don't learn sales. And having done 7 startups, I realized that sales is just one of those things that is like really hard. And I think we don't teach it because it's very hard to teach. But having collaborated with Clay Christensen for over almost 30 years, one of the things we kept talking about is, why is that? And then we said that we came to the conclusion that there's really no theory on how to sell. Like, there's no fundamental principles on selling. It's all techniques and tactics and, funnels and process, but there's no underlying theory. And so I took the jobs to be done theory and said, well, what if we actually started to look at it and understand not only how to build better product with it, but how do we actually understand how people buy with it, so we can actually understand how to design the sales process. And so demand-side sales is this aspect of looking at, most of the time, what we realize is that even though we want to be customer focused, we're usually customer focused through our product. We make mattresses. It's like, well, who needs a mattress? It's not like, how do we help people sleep better? And so you start to realize that we're not actually focused on the customer because we're looking at the customer through our product. And so demand side sales is how do we actually see the customer and understand the progress they want to make? And then how does our product or service fit into their lives? And so I have actually three different books on this. The first one I just launched, which is 101, which is just the basic theory of how to think about it and build language around it. The second one is about how to then lay all the tactics and tools for both marketing, sales, and customer success in it. And then the third one is really about kind of the management of it and the metrics and how to manage sales from a demand side perspective. So that's really what demand side sales about is like focus on your customer, stop selling them and help them make progress. And by doing that, they'll actually buy from you and you will sell.
In the greater scheme of things, do you think the jobs to be done theory is something that we need to emphasize only at the early stage of a product or of a company, or do you think this can be applied for companies that are already there? Because the most of the startups and of the companies which are just starting up has embraced the jobs to be done framework. And what you're telling, I think it's also taking into account and focusing on products which are already there, right?
That's right. That's right. I think part of this is to realize at some point in time, when we end up focusing so much on the product and competition, we end up going to a place that we actually leave the customer behind. And so if you just look like at the camera industry and how cameras were built, they basically made cameras more and more sophisticated. They made them better and better. But the reality is that more people wanted to take pictures but couldn't. And the moment that Apple walked in and had or the phone industry had basically put a camera on the phone, the reality is the big camera businesses were literally almost decimated. And so part of this is to realize, like, by just focusing on your product and focusing on competition and trying to just drive margins, the fact is what you end up doing is forgetting about the customer, and you end up over innovating on the above them, so they actually can't use your product. And so it happens both, if you will, with startups. But there's a lot of I do a lot of work with people who are established companies who are, if you will, over innovating and not actually focusing on what customers really want or are trying to make progress on.
Bob, there is this disconnection between engineers which are making products and they just want to build something, and then they end up finding someone to buy their products.
Yes.
And this approach to identify real needs and real struggles. So tell us a bit about the jobs to be done framework for the ones which are not that familiar with the jobs to be done framework.
So the basic premise behind it here, let me do this. I'm going to go, I think this one, is it this one? Yeah. So can you see my screen? Yep. So if I go to this premise here, where you start to look at it, is the basic premise behind jobs. Sorry, it's going to be blank for just a second. One more second. Bang. It's basically that people don't buy products, they hire them to do a job in their life. And so again, I'm an engineer, and I basically have an electrical undergrad, a master's in chemical mechanical, and I love to build stuff. The way I would say it is I've been breaking things for 50 years. I've been fixing things for 45 years, but I've been building things for 30 years. And part of it is to realize, like, at some point in time, build it and they will come doesn't work. At least it hasn't worked for me. So this whole notion of what jobs be done is trying to actually figure out kind of the context, the outcome, to describe the way. So I worked in Japan. One of the ways they described it was, how do I come up with solution agnostic or solution free requirements for my product or service? And the way I do that is I actually focus on the customer's struggling moment. There's a circumstance that they're in, and they get to a point where they can't go any farther. And they know they want to do something, but they're being pushed, and there's pushing that happens to them along the way. At the same time, they have some idea of what the other side looks like and stuff they're hoping for. The reality is this is a river, and the reality is like there's 1,000 ways I can get people across that river. I can build a bridge, I can build a tunnel, I can give them a boat, I can teach them how to swim, I can get a helicopter. Like, there's just infinite solutions. But value is determined by basically how badly and how much is this circumstance, how much struggle is there, And at some point, what are they hoping for on the other side? And so value is actually independent of the product. It's about the progress that people are trying to make. Ultimately, we try to see the forces that are at play. We talk about the pushes of the situation and the pull and the anxiety and the habit. But the reality is that the timeline and how people actually make the progress is what's most important. And what I've done is I've actually changed it so you take the timeline and that becomes the sales process. How do we create a first thought? How do we actually help them through passive looking? We don't convince anybody of anything. People convince themselves. And so ultimately it's following these six steps or stick phases and understanding what do we need to do to help customers make progress from first thought to passive looking to active looking, etc.
Bob, I must say that after our meeting last year, we have done this for our own company.
Tell me more.
Yeah, so we were doing. We had these fictional buyer personas.
Yeah. Personas. They're aggregations of, like I always say, they're people without souls. Like it's like a whole bunch of aggregation, and you try to go find them, and like they don't exist. There's nobody who actually fits the persona.
So we had these personas, and we started, okay, let's look at our own database of customers, and let's see the common characteristics. And we had these agencies which were using our technology to do A/B testing for their customers. And we started to ask them to participate in these interviews. And the common denominator anyways was that while we were thinking that they are buying our technology to improve their customers' conversion rate and sell more, the common denominator was that they were feeling jeopardized, that they will be outpaced by other agencies, and they were afraid to lose their customers. So that meant our, let's say, positioning and unique value proposition for agencies was wrong for 7 years in a row.
That's right. So here's the thing: is you were selling it as an offensive tool. So like in sports, we think there's ways to score goals, and they're actually buying it as a defensive tool so people don't score on them.
Yeah,
amazing. And despite that, they still bought. So what happened after you changed the positioning?
Yeah, we started to change our narratives, and however, in the meantime, we built a new product that was aiming not for agencies at all, but for end customers. And nowadays, we apply this in the DNA of the new product that we're building, thanks to this let's say understanding. So instead of building the product and then see what kind of customers can we attract, we changed the paradigm, and we've identified one of the most important problems of our customers, which are the e-commerce companies, was that their customers were churning. So customer lifetime value was too low, let's say.
Yep.
So we addressed that thing, and now we've made like 45 different interviews with the early adopters. So we applied this in 1 hour meetings with them, so that we're not going to miss it this time for the next 7 years.
The other thing though is that information, though I would say the origin was around innovation and product. What I'm finding is that information can be used to help marketing actually and positioning. It can help and pitching. It can help with sales in terms of where are people on the timeline. It can help actually understand how, like, because if you take the jobs and then flip them forward and look about it and say, like, how does somebody who's a prospect become a customer? They actually fall into one of the jobs that you end up creating. And so part of it is to actually see the job that they're in and help them figure it out. It's kind of amazing. So the way so I have a slide here I'll show you that is, let's see, I'm going to go to this one, right? So you can see that. And so this is where, basically as a prospect comes in, what happens is you did all your interviews, but as a prospect comes in, we can actually see which job that they're in by asking them 4 or 5 questions to qualify them. But then we can actually find out where they are in the timeline. And so ultimately it's how do we actually bring leads in, figure out which job they're in, and then what's the way in which we sell, pitch, and help them make progress so they can actually become a customer.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is the wrong slide, but you get the idea. Sorry, it was in the wrong mode, but you got it.
Yeah. So Bob, what I think it's also important to address here is that in order to understand the jobs to be done, you have something like an agenda in the back of your head. So I think that was happening to me, and throughout the process, I needed to persuade myself into being open.
Forget it.
To let go of the past. It's so painful for you as a founder. At least it was for me to let go of my own agenda, because it's a bad moment when you realize that you've been wrong for all this time.
So one of the things you have to remember is that I'm dyslexic, right? And so one of the things is I'm used to basically telling myself I have no idea what the answer is. But you, who got all A's in school, are used to always having the answer. And so you want to go in and test your hypotheses of what's going on. And so what you find is most research is set up to be hypothesis verifying research. But Jobs is actually not that. Jobs is actually hypothesis building research. You're going to go in and extract stories that then allow you to build better hypotheses. And if you just actually, it's not that you have to forget them, but if you just defer it and be like, I have no idea, when you hear it, you start to realize like your ideas will be 10 times better if you just delay the judgment. It's amazing.
Delay the judgment. I love that. Bob, I have to do some housekeeping here. So for all of you which are watching, if you have questions for Bob, let us know via chat, and we'll take it from there. Bob, the next question for you is, how do we apply it? How can we shift this? What do we have to do right now? So let's presume we are in the shoes of our audience.
Yep. I think so. I started a YouTube live channel around interviewing people, why people bought things. And it demonstrates some of the techniques, but the techniques are not traditional marketing research techniques. They're actually built on criminal and intelligence interrogation. It's the notion that people really don't know what they want in the future. And at the same time, they lie to themselves of why they did things or bought things. And so part of this is to actually dig what I call below the cake layer of like, oh, I really liked it. Oh, it was very easy. It's like, okay, what does easy mean? Easy in what? Easy where? There's like 27 different definitions of easy, right? And so all of a sudden it's this notion of interrogation. So to me, the place to start is what we would call do a postmortem. Literally take a sale and let somebody who's bought your product recently and let's say three weeks, 3 months, sometime after, that they passed buying the product, and then go back and extract the story in a way that literally gets them to think through this timeline, right? So it's like, when did they have the first thought? When did they have the, sorry, I'm going to do this. Can you see the screen? Yes.
Yep.
We're going to flip it. So what we do is we actually start to think about where, like, they're already using it. So it's like, let's go back in time. And what we want to do is interview them, not as a reflection of this. We want to actually almost say, like, I want to shoot a documentary of how you actually got here. And so it's like, what happened in what sequence, and being able to understand not only the sequence of events, but the emotional and social and what we call functional energy that basically put people to do it. Is like you said, people came to your product because the first thought was, I feel like I'm falling behind, right? It's not that I want to get ahead. It's the notion that I'm falling behind. There's a subtle difference between getting ahead and falling behind, but they're very different kinds of energy. Think of it as emotionally falling behind is almost like fear-based, right? They're afraid, versus getting ahead is actually aspirational based. Like, I want to win, I want to get ahead. And so the thing is though there's subtle differences, when you design something that resonates, you start to realize the language that you want to use, or the language that you've been taught to use, which are features and benefits, don't actually resonate with the way people actually make this progress. And so part of it is to understand what are the things that you have to do along the way to get there. So step one is talk to past customers and understand how they became customers, but listen and unpack. When they use words that are very, I really love this feature, you have to ask, like, why did they like the feature? What was it about the feature? What was that feature going to do for them, as opposed to just jump past it? From that, as you do 5, 6, 7, 8 of these interviews, you start to see patterns. And those patterns then help you start to understand where you can actually help in the sales process, but also in the product process and in the marketing process. Ultimately, what we're trying to get to is this notion of, sorry, it's going to be blank for 1 second, this aspect of traditionally we think about marketing and sales as fitting into this kind of process where we've got, we generate leads, we basically sign it up to get a landing page to get to, email campaign to get to a demo, right? And marketing is responsible for generating the leads, and sales is responsible for closing the leads, and customer support is responsible to handle. But when you start to look at it through this story, you start to realize from the demand side, everybody's got to help people make progress. I actually need marketing down here and help me on board. All the skills and expertise to actually figure out how people are going to actually sell the new idea or make people aware of the new idea. I need salespeople to be part down here. What happens is we end up infighting between each other because marketing just has to give sales better leads. So get me better leads, or customer success would say, hey, sales, you need to explain to the customer more of this information. And what you realize is when you start to look at it this way, actually it gets easier to sell, because we spend the energy helping the customer as opposed to infighting. And so I've been working with 5 companies to kind of prototype it. And we've been able to double sales and half the sales cycle by just doing a few simple things and realizing the demo, which was designed here for deciding, is really there's 3 demos, which is there's a demo for passive looking, a demo for active looking, and a demo for deciding. And they're fundamentally all different. And asking people where they are in their buying process is very different than asking them where they are in your sales process.
Yeah, I love that. Bob, regarding this approach where you are looking at the buying cycle, is it applicable for consumer oriented products where at least we think that the sales cycle is shorter? Are the buyers going through these phases as well, or is this
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's 2 types of buying. There's restocking, right? I've been buying my laundry detergent that I've always bought, right, forever, right? Because I ran out of laundry detergent. That's not the buying we're talking about. It's when they switch from one laundry detergent to another, that's what we're talking about. And so part of this is very applicable to consumer businesses as well, because at some point, everybody struggles with things. So if you think of Tide Pods, right? There's the pods that you throw in the washer. Mm-hmm. The reality is if you actually talk to people about the struggling moment around laundry, not about actually doing laundry, but about getting laundry done, one of the biggest problems is nobody can help because it's too complicated. And so the ultimate job that the pod help do is let me enable my partner, my kids, other people to do laundry without screwing it up, because you can put the stuff in and literally throw in the pod, because everything else was measuring and knowing what to put in and knowing what not to put in. And so when they're pulling off the Tide Pods off the shelf, it's actually help with the laundry they're getting, not just a better detergent. Right? Excellent.
So, one question that I think it applies to what you're stating. Then the jobs to be done framework can be applied for the supermarket, which is buying the laundry detergent.
Yep.
Or only for the laundry detergent.
That's right. So I've applied it to why do people go to this grocery store? What job does this grocery store do? And typically it's not a product, it's a set of products that actually help them, restock it's why do you go to this butcher, but then you go to this department store or you go to this grocery store, but you don't get your meat that all of a sudden they're adding an extra step to go to the butcher. Why are they doing that? It's not random. The whole thing is nothing is random. And so we can actually apply that way. But also it turns out that people like Kroger here in the US, they count on P&G to know everything about why people do laundry. And so they're actually, it's a double, it's two different levels of shopping jobs. And then what we would say is actually, household jobs. And how do we actually help do those 2 things? And again, most retailers don't actually make the products, but they know which set of products to have in the store.
Yeah, that's excellent. We're having some questions, and I'm gonna ask you something from Andrea.
Yep.
What is the biggest mistake a salesperson does when he's trying to sell something?
So I think and again, I think, let's be clear, I did this when I first started selling, which is I focused on my features and benefits, and I assumed that because they took the meeting that they knew what they wanted, and I literally just told them my pitch. I didn't ask them why. I didn't ask them, it's not understanding people's context and outcome and just rolling right into the features and benefits. The other part is thinking that you can close people faster than they want to be closed. I think those are the two big mistakes that a lot of new salespeople make, is they think that everybody who walks in the door is a prospect.
Excellent.
Right? I always talk about the fact that I want people to earn the right to a demo. Right? Most people will say if they'll take the demo, well, we should go do it. It's like, no, they have to get the right people there. They have to actually have the right end. Like, at some point you can do a demo, but the reality is, like, if they're not ready for it and they really don't want it and they've agreed to it and you've bullied them into it, it's a waste of everybody's time. Right?
So I think it's the same like in life, right? Bad assumptions about reality.
Yep.
So another question coming from Vladimir. Can you explain what a customer buying timeline actually means?
Yeah. So think of it this way. Let me just go back to it so I have it as a reference point. I'll go to this one, and then I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to go there. Tell me when you can see it. Got it?
Yeah.
So the thing is the buying timeline it's from the customer's perspective. So think about it as when you go to move flats or buy a house. I think we talked about you buying your new house, right? When we were together, and part of this is to say you have to ask people a question to create the space. And so the first thought is really there's only 4 ways to do it: ask a question, tell a story, give them a new metric, or state the obvious, right? It's like, and so to me, this is like the initial way in which to get people to think about making progress. And they might already have the notion of progress. And so when they come to you, they might already be further down the line, but to create demand, you actually have to do it in this space. The second one is really then when passive looking. Passive looking is about framing the problem. It's about searching for solutions at a very high level. It's about learning the language. It's about deciding whether the problem is big enough and you need to do something about it, right? If we think of active looking is about seeing possibilities. It's what we call orthogonal features, one thing at a time. Oh, I could have this. Oh, I could do that. Oh, it's very much like magic wanding, right? And it's where people are exploring a lot of different things, and it's almost like a playground, like a kid in a candy store. But then you move to the second part, which is deciding, which is connecting the dots, framing up the options, seeing the constraints, understanding the trade-offs you have to make, picking a starting point. It's almost like making it real, right? And then at some point in time, it's then once they've decided, it's like, all right, how do we actually start to use it? And it's like, how do we make sure the expectations are clear? How do we actually help people feel progress? And what is the notion of what we would say is, if you think about buying is in the mind, and the actual consumption of the product is how they make progress. How do we make sure that they're actually making the progress that they expected when they bought it? And then ongoing use is, how do we build habits? How do we understand where the new struggling moments are? Every new innovation solves one set of struggling moments, but creates a new set of struggling moments. And so part of it is for you to stay on top of it. And so part of this is to walk through the basically these 6 stages. And as people come to you and say, oh, I'd like to see your product. Are they really, where are they? Are they actually in passive looking, or are they actually in deciding? Right? Do they know the language? And so understanding where your customers are or your prospects are in the timeline is very essential, because a lot of times we end up giving them the wrong information at the wrong time.
Yeah. Bob, I have to ask you something which I've been struggling with as well.
Yeah.
This is my own struggling.
Yeah,
struggle,
perfect.
right?
Love it.
So we were applying this jobs to be done framework, and we discovered that we've started with this with the job, and ended up with 5 different jobs.
Yep.
But the overall thing was that e-commerce entrepreneurs, which had the mid-sized companies, and their job was to keep customers from churning. So
Yep.
the ongoing habit for me. However, they were describing this differently. And
Yes.
As we are in B2B, it's not so simple like you had in the sneaker story, where the job of sneakers was not to get something sweet, but to feel like they've got a meal without buying a burger.
Or just, help me get through that moment, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing is that and I'm going to show you on this page here, which is you might have 3 different jobs. So one job might be help me defend against, right? But this is like, let's call this, a very large company. This is a mid-sized company, and this is a small company.
Yeah.
Though the mechanism of how the job they want to do is the same, they might talk about it differently. And so this is where your personas or your segmentation or other things would come in. But like this one is about help me grow, right? And this might be help me be more efficient, for example. Right. And so as they're going into this, it's like, help me defend. Well, large companies talk about it this way. Mid companies talk about it that way. Small companies talk about it this way. But it's all the same kinds of things. And it's the same feature sets of like, well, let's benchmark where you're at. Let's understand so how you deliver on it is actually the same. It might be that you use different languages. Right. Yeah. And so part of this is to realize like, the job is one of those things that is universal. It's to be honest, I didn't really get that until later, because like at some point this could be France, Hungary, Romania, like all of a sudden they might talk about it a little bit differently because of the language, but the job is still the same as help me defend. And so part of this is to realize that sometimes you might actually have to have channel strategies to go against the jobs, but the jobs are still the same. Right?
Yeah.
And I want to make sure we're clear is that jobs are not tasks, right? They're not like the car gets me from point A to point B. Jobs are these aggregated things where they're sets of tasks. They're sets of use cases that all relate to the same kind of context outcome that they're looking for. And so they're this higher level thing it's multifaceted. And in the book End of Average, he talks about jagged. It's not like this one is just about defending, but there might be some efficiency parts in this, but they're primarily trying to get to help me defend myself versus here is I need to lower my costs versus here is I need to grow. And it gets back to that it doesn't mean I want to grow without efficiency. It's just that here's the priority by which they're actually doing their activities.
Yeah, excellent. Bob, we have another question coming from Adriana. Jason Fried wrote the foreword of your book. Tell us how you met him and how come he got to write the foreword. Sorry, but please share it.
So Jason and I have been friends for about 10 years. I've been working with the people at Basecamp for about that long of time. The one thing I would say is most of my clients become my friends. And so, over the years, we've just been able to collaborate and communicate on many different things at many different levels. And as I wrote the book, it was one of those things where I was hoping Clay could write the foreword, but he passed away in January. And Jason was kind enough to step in and kind of write the foreword. And he did a great job because he talks about how he, quote, learned sales when he was 15. And then he realized that he learned it all wrong. And it's one of those things where Jason is he's a very, very great entrepreneur, and we have very, very similar kind of beliefs and views. And I think I'm about 15 years older than he is, but at the same time, we have a great camaraderie.
Excellent. I love Basecamp and his work as well. So you are practically on a book tour now. How is the online book tour different from the offline book tour for you coming from?
I don't know. But my thing is I love to teach and build. And so I kind of almost put like this. So think of me as the engineer who was able to put this together. But the reality is that at some point, this is almost like this is what I have to do in order to make sure the product is successful. So I don't like, to be honest, this is actually way easier for me because I can actually continue to write my next book or my next 2 books on it while I'm doing this, because I didn't have to hop on a plane and come see you guys. And so part of this is I'm taking advantage of not having to travel so much. Like in January and February, I did 128,000 miles. And I literally have not flown since. And I went to actually check my miles the other day and I had to re-download the app. And so then I turned to my wife and I looked at her and said, like, do you need me to go away for a while? Like they're so used to me not being there for a while. That's like, okay, I've been around maybe too much, but you know, I think the virtual tour is way better for me.
Yes. So you took a break from
all the travel. That's right.
Yeah. We will take a break as well for just 1 minute, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
One of the biggest challenges as a startup, even as you start amassing great clients, is building trust and brand recognition. So working with a company like Microsoft gives incredible credibility out of the get-go. It definitely helps open doors.
Microsoft has embraced the open source community where developers, enterprises, and startups can all benefit from.
Microsoft does an unexplainably good job of connecting startups with these opportunities. It's been really powerful on the new business front in terms of scaling your startup and connecting to key resources.
So we're back. So Bob, tell us, what are you pushing over there? What's going on? What kind of technology are you using?
Yeah. So I have, so you can see me up in the corner as well. So one of the things I've been doing is, because I've had to, I haven't had to travel, is I've literally been changing up and innovating around different technologies to basically make people feel like they're in my office when they're not in my office. And so a lot of times I have these different cameras. I have different views of basically being able to see different things. So this is what I call a document camera. So I can actually write things. And then you've got this view, but I have a small little switch over here that literally helps me kind of go back and forth without having to go into Zoom and go share my screen. I can literally just do that. And that's sharing my screen. And so it allows me to actually be way more effective. And so we'll have a meeting and I'll be in the room and I can literally go like this and then turn on the picture and have 2 people on the couch and we can have a conversation. And then we can actually go to the whiteboard and talk on the whiteboard. And then I do have a whiteboard camera that you can see that's in front there. It's not connected right now, but I have different ways in which to kind of do this. And so I have a 10,000 square foot design studio. And what I've done is I've literally just, I think the first week of COVID, I took each room, I went room by room and I took everything out of the room and then I brought it back in and repurposed it to say, like, how would we use this room now that it's going to be virtual? And so, for example, the cameras that I have are actually security cameras. So I literally went and bought, 15 or 20 security cameras that are 4K. They're HDMI and USB. I can actually use them in different ways. And so every month right now, I'm just kind of iterating. This is the one room I have that it's kind of locked down. But at the end of the day, it allows me to kind of just be able to kind of come sit down and talk and teach. And so I've been teaching. Last night I taught at Emory. This afternoon I teach at Harvard. I was at Cambridge earlier this week. So I can now I can actually teach to many different universities at the same time. So it's one of those things where I feel like this is enabling me to be 10 times more productive because now I don't have to travel.
Excellent.
Lots of fun.
Bob, have you seen something exciting after this pandemic hit the world, or what exciting things have you? So here's the thing is
the pandemic is a horrible thing, but to me, it changes the context that people are in, which causes struggling moments that causes us to innovate. So to me, for example, I think school is going to change forever. I just don't think that we're going to be able. So as much as people are complaining about virtual, the notion is there's certain parts of virtual that people are going to like. And then all of a sudden there's this aspect of how do we actually learn? Like, I don't think we actually teach. We teach in a way that's the average. We teach like almost to the persona that doesn't exist. And ultimately every child learns their own way. And so part of this is how do we actually use this kind of experience to actually change the way we teach to basically match the way the learner learns. And so instead of having to teach in one way that gets to 80% of the class, can we actually teach in multiple ways that enable kids to get it, like because of the way they think or the way their brain's wired? And so to me, I think things like education, I think shopping is going to change. I think shopping is like, at some point in time, people have realized like how hard it was to actually order stuff online. But now it's the fact is they can order what they know online, but they have to go shop for things they want to do new. So shopping is going to become more about helping people make progress. It's about what's the next pair of shoes. Like if I just want to repeat the pair of shoes, I know what to buy. But if I don't know what the next pair of shoes is, I have to do the research. I have to go through the process. And so I think you're going to see over time that there's some people who think we're going to come back to the way it was. And my experience would say is that there's always going to be a little bit of this that's going to be caught back with what was the past. And so we're going to actually have a new version, a better version of how things are playing out. So I think retail is going to change. I think vacations are going to change. I think houses are changing. I already know that where people are buying bigger houses because they can work out of the house. And so people are actually getting, and they don't have to go in the office. And so people are actually getting paid more here so they can actually go afford to buy a room that's their office as opposed to just have a 2-bedroom. So I think there's just many, many things that are going on. And part of it is the interesting part about the people who pre-read my book or have been reading the book is that they might learn about sales, but the common theme that everybody has said is they go, I now feel like I'm a better consumer because I'm actually thinking about why am I buying what I'm buying? What am I doing what I'm doing? And so I think that's part of what I'm trying to actually get across is like a lot of times we buy stuff and we actually don't know why we're buying it. And I think taking the time to understand the progress you're trying to make by buying, these markers that have a brush tip on one end and a hard tip on the other end, they're all very purposeful because of the work I'm doing. And so part of it is to actually be sensitive to my struggling moments and realize I'm willing to pay a premium for a marker like this. And by the way, I have a whole set of markers over here like that, because I need to be able to draw dark enough that you can see this. Because when I use the pencil, you can't see it.
Yeah, excellent. So we have another question coming from Alex. How can you regain the trust of those customers that were thrown away by your previous attempts of building more of the demand sales approach?
Yeah, that's a great one. So here's the thing is, first of all, they weren't your customer to begin with. So one is if they left, what we need to do is understand why they left. What's interesting is most people leave not because of you, but because their context changed. And we keep thinking it's us, and it's not us, it's them. And so part of this is being able to understand as you go through this. And can you actually see, like, for example, people that we were going to close or said they were going to close and then didn't, they just actually went from deciding back to passive looking because something in their lives changed. Think of it this way. I feel it's pretty arrogant for us to think that they actually got rid of us because of us. Because when you really hear the stories of people who left us, 9 times out of 10, it had nothing to do with you. Or if it did, it was like 2 or 3 small things, but there were a whole bunch of other things that caused them to get there. And so part of it is what's the context that would be appropriate for them to come back? And so part of it is to look at those things and understand the causal mechanisms behind it. It's not about that. It's not negotiations in my opinion. This is about understanding what would have to happen in their world for them to actually even think about trying to help them again.
Yeah. Well, I have a question from Corina. She's asking me, I've said on social media that your ideas and the encounter with you changed the way I did business. I continue to do business, and if I can tell more about this, what changed and how. So what I think it's really important is that I've studied this. Actually, it's called featureitis. It's a disease that entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs have. I had it as well.
Yeah.
I was wrongly believed that the problem that my company had is that I haven't got enough features to compete with X, Y, and Z. So after this, I got back to listening to the customers and understanding what was the problem, the job, the progress that they wanted to do with our software. And instead of doing this parity game when we had something like 1 million euro in funding and our competitor Optimizely had 170 million euro. So we pivoted towards a job that was more in line with our vision of our software. So instead of staying in the field of A/B testing technology, we've pivoted towards this customer lifetime value optimization category, which was kind of a game changer for us, and it transformed our mentality. And of course, we are now seeing the progress, because it's a great thing when you are different, and when customers which are coming to you are giving you a 5 of 5 rating on all the platforms from which you are getting them. So I think it's kind of fulfilling to feel that you are doing a purposeful and a meaningful work with you, and you are not perceived like a copycat for the whatever competitor.
Yep. I think the other part is to realize, like, the notion of a customer for life is actually kind of it's a weird notion. It's the fact is their life is going to change, and as their life changes, you don't necessarily have to grow with it, and to realize, like, your best customers sometimes lead you awry. And so you follow your best customers, and then the new customers actually can't get to you. I mean, that's one of the things Jason Fried talks about all the time. If he added resource allocation and Gantt charts and all the stuff that the best users want, he says, no, go to Microsoft Project, go somewhere else for it, because the number one reason why people buy us is because, you know, it's very easy, and I can get, you know, it's so easy I can get my grandmother to use it, right? And it's like, if I add all these things that you want, and it's like, and until you actually leave me, you know, you can complain about it, but the reality is, like, you're not leaving me. And so part of this is that difference between what, you know, it's that aspect of really understanding what behaviors people have versus what people say.
Yeah. We have another question from Pretzel. How to approach situations where the customer and consumer are different, and it is often the case with B2B platforms or services.
Yeah. So this is a great question, because it's one of those things where what I would say is the people at the buying level. So this is where we would call them the customer, and then we'd call it the consumer. They actually have very different jobs. So the simple way to think about it is, I worked for a toy company for a while, and one of the things is you had to actually figure out a toy that a parent would buy that a kid would play with. So if I built the toys that kids wanted to play with, parents would never buy it. And if I bought the toys that parents wanted, kids never actually played with it. So you have to actually understand kind of these two different levels, and understand the jobs at the buying level and the jobs at the user level, and make sure that you actually identify the trade-offs between the two. So think of like Salesforce. Most salespeople don't get to choose Salesforce. It's the VP of sales, the VP of marketing, the VP of digital, the VP of IT. They actually buy Salesforce because of a very big problem. But at the same time, if I buy Salesforce and it doesn't work for the salespeople or the marketing people, it doesn't work either. And so part of it is that you have to actually understand the jobs of what we call the big hire and the little hire. The big hire is like buying the bottle of Windex to clean the windows. And the little hire is where do I spray it, and does it do the job that I'm actually spraying it on? And so part of it is you have to actually see jobs from those two levels. And what we found is that, especially as a salesperson, to actually help people understand that one is, most of the time the buyer is not necessarily as worried about the user. And the fact is to actually have the user voice in there. It's kind of like, going to Kroger and talking about laundry. The Kroger people don't care about laundry, but the fact is because P&G knows about laundry, they can actually help them understand the best way to merchandise. So I think it's those kinds of things where you have to understand the big hire and the little hire, and they are fundamentally different interviews and different jobs.
So in a B2B aspect, as Pretzel is stating here, would you do the interview with the decision maker, with the user? Would you do different interviews?
Yeah, I do different. So here's the thing: is very early in my career, I started by, as most engineers, I start by building the best product for the user. Like, this is going to be an awesome experience for them. This is going to be better than anything else. But the reality is what happened is I couldn't find anybody to buy it. Right. And so then I realized, okay, I'm going to figure out what people are trying to buy and see the bigger picture. But then when I did, I ran out of money to make it so people could use it. And so part of it is from a product management perspective, it's making sure that I have the right set of features and the right set of, I'm addressing the right jobs from the buying perspective, but I also have enough to actually put in to make sure it's usable. And so, to be honest, it's two sets of interviews, one set of interviews around buying and one interview against using, and then, to be honest, laying them together and seeing where the gaps and where the conflicts are, because it's their conflict, not yours. And if they can't make it work, you still lose.
Yeah. I think we have other questions as well. Just a second. Yep. So we have a question from Vlad. When was the first time you find out about Bob, and when did you first meet? So I've heard of Bob Moesta via SoundCloud. If you recall the Open Table podcast.
Yeah.
We've met first time at How to Web conference last year that was amazing. It was a great conference, and it's one of those moments when I realized that it was good times pre-pandemic. Actually, when we met, I've persuaded Bob to do an interview, and we went into a bar at the 11th floor in Piazza Prese Libere for the Romanian audience. And actually, by the way, Bob, you told me that every year you start fresh. So you start with no financial resources, and you plan ahead so that you can make it up to this year.
I save enough to basically make sure that I can grow old. But I literally don't make sure I have as much excess, because I realize I end up making a donation somewhere anonymously at the end of every year. So I have to wake up and figure out kind of what value do I need to create this year. That's just how I've lived my life for a long time. I sold my first startup, and to be honest, I had money, but it was I didn't know what to do. And so the whole aspect is I realized that I'm lucky enough to have everything I have, but at the same time, I need to actually figure out how to help people and add value. Yeah.
Your last book was addressing the education aspect. How do you see education being transformed? You've touched a bit this subject earlier, but tell us about how you envisioned a real shift in the way we educate our children.
Yeah, so I've joined a school board. So I actually am part of a school here in the U.S. And then I also I teach at several different universities. The book that I wrote was Choosing College, and it was really about the university kind of system that we have here in the U.S. And that it was about helping students understand and be explicit about the job they were hiring college to do. Because what happens is if you go to college and you don't graduate, the likelihood you can pay back your loans is almost zero. So part of it is to make sure that you're very purposeful in doing that. I think college is going to be transfer. So Clay and Michael Horn, who's my co-author on the book, said that back in 2017 or 16, that 25% of the universities will be, either gone or merged by 2025. And nobody actually believed that. Now, I'm not sure that they predicted the pandemic, but the thing is that at some point, nobody can afford a generic education anymore. And so part of it is that people need to be more purposeful to it. And at some point in time, how do I say, the credit hour, which is the way that they bill for it, the way they pay teachers, the way, everything backed around is like people can actually learn faster than an hour. And so as we see this being modularized, you're going to start to see what we call micro credits, or like it might be better for you to get 3 small different kinds of credits than actually try to get a full degree. And so I think that you're going to see the modularization of education and it to get fragmented, and that there'll still be universities. But the fact is at some point in time, I'm just not sure people will be able to afford to go for 4 years. And like right now in the US, to become a teacher, it might cost you almost $100,000, but you actually will take 20 years to pay back that $100,000 in loan. And so part of it is to reframe basically how to actually get people to be productive. So I think that's happening in the next 3 to 5 years for sure.
Bob, we have a question here. You mentioned you work with a few companies and double the sales while halving the sales time.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about one specific example?
Yeah, so one company is a company called Autobooks, and they basically sell to banks, and they put in a platform that literally makes a big bank or a medium-sized bank, turns it into having all the features of like a PayPal. And so it's that notion of being able to get paid, but now the money goes into your bank, and oh, by the way, you have access to it, and they don't charge you as much. And so there's people who kind of are sophisticated enough, but they're actually going after what we would call is the small to medium businesses, people who paint houses, people who cut grass, people who do I'll say manual type labor, things that where that is different and not tech savvy. And so what happened is they would have to sell banks, and then they'd have to sell small business, right? And in the bank side, the banks were very, very hesitant because at some point in time, it was one of those things where it was a feature that they felt they were adding to the bank. But what we did is we actually went and interviewed people who bought from them, understood the jobs. And then from it, we realized that one of the bigger points was the demo. And then they kept doing one demo, and everything was about getting somebody to the demo. And what we realized is that depending on where they were in the timeline, there should actually be 3 different demos. And so by breaking the demo apart and being able to actually have very different objectives depending on where they were in the timeline, they were able to actually help people realize where they were, educate them about kind of what they needed to be educated about, and be able to close them, because a lot of times they'd end up like giving them everything too early or giving them not enough too late. And so part of it was this aspect of being able to self-identify where they are in the timeline, which in some cases they were able to now do 3 demos faster than doing the 1 demo that would never close.
Excellent. I'll steal that from you. So, Bob, this is our last question today. How do you think your book will actually change sales, or what do you hope to accomplish?
I wrote about, in the front of it is what's the job of the book. And I think the job of the book is 2 things. One is I think it complements current sales, and it literally helps people see that and remind people that sales is about the customer. It's not about the product. Trying to sell something to somebody that they don't want. It's like one apple makes the bushel rotten, right? And so my thing is to actually try to get people to focus back on the customer. The second real thing was, how do we actually get entrepreneurs and startups and founders and business schools to start teaching the foundations of sales early enough that people start to think about it from the customer side? Because I just think that at some point you're learning all these other theories and all these other things around business, and they teach you like in an incubator, they teach you how to raise money, they teach you how to build a business model, they teach you how to hire and recruit, but they don't teach you about sales. And so ultimately I'm trying to make sure that my book has impact in those 3 kinds of places.
Perfect. Bob, my personal question, I told you it was the last, but I'm going to ask you, are you planning to have an audible version as well?
Yes, of course. So I couldn't read it, so I have somebody who's reading it. I just approved the version. It should be out in October. So I have a Kindle version, a paperback version, a hardcover, and then I will have an Audible version in October.
Excellent. Bob, thanks a lot for being with us today, and thank you How to Web for hosting us today.
Yep. Thank you.
We're Web Live. Thank you for listening. Join us for the next How to Web Live episode on October 8th. Until next time, stay curious.